This is the Doomsday Diesel review of the brand new Lincoln Power MIG 211i MIG welder. I got to spend the last couple weeks working hand in hand with this machine. The last several days I got to spend about 4 to 6 hours a day working with this. I got a lot of feedback to share with you. So first, let's go over some of the technical specifications of this unit. So if you're looking at purchasing a 240 or a 120 welder, this will do both. It's got a dedicated 220 volt plug that is hardwired into the machine already. And if you want to plug it into 110, you simply plug this end into this supplied adapter cable, and then this end goes in your 120 outlet. I've used it on both. So where should we start? Let's start with the equipment that it comes with. The ground clamp is going to be sufficient for the amperage that this machine's putting out. You can always buy the bigger ground clamp. They're extremely affordable. They're about 10 bucks. It's got the standard DINS connector, so I've actually hooked up one of my longer 2-aught welding ground clamps to this machine if I need that longer reach on it. For most of what you'll be doing with this machine, this is completely adequate though. The Magnum 100L, I would rather see this machine come with the 175 that the 210 MP and the 215 MPI come with. This unit is based off of the machine's rated duty cycle. So this machine is rated below 100 amps. So that's why it gets the 100 amp gun. The other two machines are rated just above it, so that's why they get the step up to the bigger gun. The older Power MIG 180 transformer unit, it also comes with the Pro 100L, so I'm sure there's a lot of history there. They were probably comfortable with going with this. However, I'd just like to see it come with a heavier duty gun. I've bought machines before. Working with my local welding supplier, was able to actually have the machines furnished with the upgraded gun just for a little bit of a fee. You could maybe work with your brick and mortar store to do that. I purchased this unit from bakersgas.com. I didn't bother to ask them about the gun. I wanted to test this one out, see how it performed. Really the only thing I have to say, the diffuser, you really need to go ahead and tighten that firmly with a wrench, because I've had the nozzle get stuck to the diffuser, and then when you go to unthread the nozzle, the whole works comes out of the end of the gun. So at that point, I had to use a pair of snap ring pliers to get into the little groove, because it mounts flush. So that was a minor setback there. I really like how this uses the same tips that my Power Wave uses, so I don't have to carry 2 sets of consumables. The nozzles are different, but you don't go through nozzles like you go through tips. The nozzle on this one actually stays clean very easily. The slag and the buildup drops right out very easily. Actually a lot easier than on my Power Wave. Actually so far I haven't had any issues, but I've been welding relatively light stuff. Where you'll start to notice the gun's lower duty cycle is when you start maxing out the machine's amperage for long periods, and you'll notice the gun starts to get uncomfortably hot. Now, I don't plan on welding with this machine to that extent. I have my industrial machine for industrial welding, so you might be looking to weld all day on 1/4 inch material, and if you are, I would see if you can talk your brick and mortar store into supplying that upgraded 175L gun. Speaking of guns, I'm doing a lot of body repair with this right now. So I'm doing thin gauge material, and I'm doing lots of quick, basically tack welds repeatedly, just zap, zap, zap. And what I've noticed that I really dislike about this machine, which I thought it came with, turns out it doesn't, is the run-in feature. So there's no run-in control. So what is run-in speed? It's a feature on the machine that you can set so your wire comes out slower until the welder detects that you've established an arc in your welding. So when I'm tacking a piece on the body, the wire comes out full speed. And if it doesn't establish an arc right away, if the wire doesn't hit the metal just perfectly, the wire will actually physically push that piece out of the way. or I've also had it push the gun back. And when I'm welding thicker material, it's coming out, 400 to 500 inches a minute. You have to hold the gun very firmly because that wire comes out with such force and speed. It pushes the gun back, and then you get a ton of spatter everywhere. So that's why run-in is important. Your 210 and 215 MPs have that feature. The older Power MIG 180 didn't have it. I thought this unit did have it, or I honestly probably wouldn't have bought this. And for that reason alone, I'd actually recommend the 210 over this machine. I think currently the price difference is about $140, but to me, after using this machine for a couple weeks, it'd be $140 totally worth it, especially if this is your only machine. This was the kind of machine I bought when I was in college, used it for about 6 years, got all the way up to starting Doomsday Diesel, and I was welding motor mounts for hours on end, maxing the machine out. You're going to want that run-in feature if you're using your machine that much. The other features that this machine lacks that the 210 and 215 MPs have is the pre and post flow control for your shielding gas, and that just controls for how long you'll let gas come out of the gun before and after you've pulled the trigger and let go of the trigger. So this machine's very straightforward. I'll show you the controls and how to use the interface once we get to welding. As far as specifications, I'll let you guys look all that up if you really want to dive deep into it. But on the 110 volt side of things, this machine is neck and neck with the 210 and the 215 MPs. I think this actually has a little bit better duty cycle than the 210 MP, and it's just a hair short of the 215. I used it on the 110 volt setting to do some stuff around the shop where pulling my industrial machine around to get to is kind of a bear. So this thing did really well. I plugged the 110 power adapter straight into an outlet, so I didn't have to mess with extension cords, reducing my max amperage or duty cycle or anything, and it performed flawlessly. This is an inverter machine, so it's going to have less of a power draw than your older transformer units. The only other unit I've ever used on 110 volts was a transformer. This is the original Miller-Matic 211. That thing had to have some really thick extension cord, or you had to have it basically plugged right into a pretty stout outlet, or you'd be tripping breakers. So this thing, it worked great. I was limited to roughly an 1/8 inch on the settings, but I wasn't doing any heavy welding. I was doing some minor, basically sheet metal repairs around the shop. So worked great. It's extremely convenient, especially with the cart that I've designed here. So as far as the 240 goes, it's actually got a max output of 211 amps, hence the name 211i. Not all of Lincoln's machines are named like that. This one is. So the 210 and the 215 MPs, they have both the same max output of 220, so they're 9 more amps. And the duty cycle on this is a little bit less than the 210 and the 215. So you do get more output out of the 210 and the 215 than this, which to me is kind of odd because this is obviously a dedicated MIG only machine, whereas those are multi-process machines. So I would think for this being nearly the same cost as those, that this would have better MIG features, better duty cycle, but it doesn't. It lacks in every department. So another reason I would go with the MP units over this. One of the big reasons I wanted to buy this unit over the MPs was because of the simplistic controls. There's no LCD screen to potentially burn out. You've got your analog displays for your voltage and your wire feed speed, which the Power MIG 180 didn't have. The 180 just had 2 knobs basically. So I like the controls on it, and I don't need the stick or the TIG functions. And let's be honest, I doubt anybody's doing lift arc TIG. Really the hot setup to get is one of these MIG and or multi-process machines for your MIG stick. and then you go get a square wave for your TIG. I do really like the capacity for the 12.5 pound spool. I put one of those in the day I got the machine. So without further ado, let's head on over to the welding table and I'll show you how this guy welds, and I'll let you see how it compares to my Power Wave. So I'm going to show you some welding with the 211i on some 1/4 inch steel. First thing we'll have to do is tack all of these into position before we can final weld them. So the first comparison I'll show you here is with the 211i. I'm running 300 inches per minute right now, and that's how fast the wire comes out. On my Power Wave, this is 465 inches a minute, and this is how fast the wire comes out. And if you watch, it runs its run-in speed until a certain amount of time passes, and then it goes to the 465. Another really nice thing you can add to any gun is one of these hooks. Makes hanging up your gun very much quicker and easier. So here's tacking with the 211. Here's tacking with the Power Wave C300. Now you can see we have noticeably more spatter just around the tacks here than over here with the Power Wave. These are also humped up. They're going to be a little bit colder. This is with pulse transfer over here on the Power Wave. I realize this is going to be kind of loud to hear over, but I have to have the Mobiflex running or else it smogs out my entire shop with the welding smoke, and then I can't breathe in here. So we'll go over our controls here. We've got our voltage, our wire feed speed, which is essentially our amperage. Then we've got our welding wire diameter, the shielding gas or the mode, and then this is the auto select. So we're running 035 wire. We're actually running C10 gas, the closest thing to any of these for the auto setting. And then you can dial this around. So we'd be on 1/4 inch. It sets us to 20 volts, 300 inches a minute. You can go to manual mode, but then you can't use this auto select feature. You've also got C100, flux core, stainless steel, or your spool gun for aluminum welding. You can also control your settings up top even when you're in an automatic mode. To get back to your automatic settings, just turn this wheel and go back to whatever setting. So we'll run this at the suggested 20 volts and 300 inches a minute, which is short circuit transfer. Next, I'll show you what a pulse weld coming from the Power Wave looks like. So here we have our short circuit transfer with the 211i. You can notice a lot of fine spatter and a couple larger globs. Also notice the profile of the bead. Coming over to the Power Wave, you'll notice relatively no spatter. Next, I'm going to run the 211i on some qualified settings, still in short circuit transfer. These are settings I qualified at one of my previous places of employment. So on the Power Wave, here's our wire feed speed. Here we have the option to set our run-in wire feed speed. We can even change the time, and then we have post-flow and pre-flow in seconds. So we're going to go into short circuit transfer on this as well. And we'll run the same settings over here as on the 211i, so we have a true apples to apples. So first up is the 211. And here's our Power Wave at the same settings. So these are our 211 samples. This was the preset settings. These are my qualified settings. You can see we have still some larger pieces of spatter along with that fine spatter. Then moving over here to the Power Wave, this is the same setting as our 211. We do have the fine spatter, but we don't have the large globs of spatter. Comparing these two, the bead profile appears to be about the same, and they both appear to be a little bit better than the preset settings on the 211. Now for the time being, I'm going to leave my settings that I've qualified myself confidential. I may share them at a later point on an app such as Patreon, where you can pay to see them. You can always go on websites like Lincoln and Miller, where they'll give you some of their suggested settings, or you can use your machine's own suggested settings. Now we're going to move on to trying to do a spray transfer with the 211, and I'll show you with the Power Wave here just how the spray transfer is supposed to sound and look. Now where the short circuit transfer is supposed to sound like bacon frying in a pan, spray transfer should sound like a whisper or a silent hiss. And here's the Power Wave with spray transfer. So as you can see over here on the left with the 211, we have the most spatter out of any of the settings we tried. Over here on the right with the Power Wave, we do have spatter, but less than what we've had with the short circuit transfer. It was challenging to keep the 211's gun from pushing back because the wire feed was so high. So as you can see and hear, the 211 really just isn't set up or capable of outputting spray transfer. The Power Wave was very easy to control the gun with the run-in control setting. The other thing I want to show you is when I'm clipping my wire, because you don't want to have a big ball on the end of your wire before you start a bead. That results in a cold start, excessive spatter, and less penetration than you'd get if you clip your wire. So I'll usually just give a quick jut out of the gun, which is harder to do with this gun without any run-in because it shoots that much wire out. You have to get in the habit of just barely tapping the trigger. If you hold down on it for any length of time, you're wasting a lot of wire. And once you have a machine like this where you have a run-in setting, you can hold down for 2 seconds and it still comes out very slowly. This is much easier to trim your wire without wasting a lot of excess wire. Now going back and forth between these two guns, it would be pretty challenging. This thing's a lot physically bigger to handle. This thing is very nimble and small. This is actually really nice for getting into some tight spaces. This thing keeps your hand so far away from the heat source, it's comfortable for high amperage and long periods of welding. I think you can see from our comparisons here that the 211 does just fine for the hobbyist, the introductory, or the part-time welder. You really don't need to step into the industrial style machine unless you're really going to be doing a lot of heavy welding. And as you can see, once you've had some time to spend with your new welder and play with the settings and get comfortable with it, the 211 can produce a presentable and acceptable bead. So with that, we'll move into our closing thoughts. Alright, so now that you've seen this bad boy in action, you can see it can clearly weld. It can lay down some really nice beads. If you can find a heck of a deal on this machine, I wouldn't hesitate to buy it, but if I was buying a new machine all over again, I'd definitely spring for the 210 MP. So let's talk about price a little bit. I think videos are a good opportunity to talk about price. It's kind of like a snapshot in time. When I got my Millermatic 211 back in 2011, that machine was right around 1,100 bucks. I got this machine for a total out the door cost of $11.91. At the time of filming, cyberweld.com has a 7% off sale on this. Baker's Gas did a price match to that sale. This unit came out at $1,300. I didn't see that it was released until after the 1st of January. I think it came out roughly in November of 2022. They had it at $1,300 with a $100 Lincoln rebate. I heard that it went up to an MSRP of $1,500 for a short time, then dropped right back down to $1,300. I wasn't able to jump on that $100 rebate, but again, I got the 7% deal, which was like 91 bucks plus my credit card kickback. So comparing this to about, I don't know, 11 and a half years ago, this unit basically 90 bucks more than what I paid, and it's an inverter unit with higher duty cycle, way lighter, you know, it's half the weight of that Miller-Matic. That's a heck of a deal when you think about all the inflation and stuff and over 11 years. But if you look at the 210 MP, that's got a $500 rebate right now because its MSRP is roughly $2,000. You know, that just shows you how much crazy unnecessary markup there is, because obviously nobody's going to sell something at a loss. So they're still making money on it with a $500 rebate. It'd be awesome to see the 215 MPI come down to that kind of $1,400 range, and then I think it would be the clear winner over this unit. With the $500 gap between the 210 and the 215 MPs, I think the 210 is the clear winner there. This unit here, you know, 1,300 MSRP, I think that's a bit high for the lack of the features that it has. I think 1,100 MSRP would probably be about where this unit needs to be. They should put the run-in feature on it. My final thoughts are, with the lack of the run-in control, the lower duty cycle and lesser max amperage output, and the smaller MIG gun, my pick would be the 210 MP. I think you're gonna like the added features and the multifunctional capability of the 210 MP for roughly, like I said, $140 more. So I hope you got something useful out of this review. I know every other review I saw posted before I recorded this video was basically just a sales ad. So hopefully we'll see you in a future episode of Welding with Joe.